Welcome to the final Contemporary Perspectives lecture series of the 2011 academic year. My name is Lynn Allen, and I'm the director of the School of Visual Arts here at Boston University. Judy Pfaff is, in my mind, a conundrum. In the early years, when she was living in New York and had no money, she joked about her work. There was the year of aluminum foil, and then the year of little tiny wire structures. And then she'd get a router or a tool, and it was the year of the router, the year of the jigsaw. It's as if with every new material, she created a whole new image that came about from that tool, that color, or that material. A pioneer of installation art in the 1970s, Pfaff synthesizes sculpture, painting, and architecture into dynamic environments in which space seems to expand and collapse. It fluctuates between the 2- and 3-dimensional, pierces through walls, and careens through the air, achieving lightness and displaying an explosion of energy. She is a master of steel, fiberglass, and plaster, as well as salvaged materials and natural elements such as tree roots, creating exuberant, sprawling sculptures and installations that weave landscape, architecture, and color into a tense yet organic whole. But that's not all. Judy Pfaff has been making dynamic prints, pushing the medium for years. They range from small, exquisitely complicated prints to large wood blocks that also incorporate digital, hand painting, and collaged cutouts. Like her large-scale installations, her prints have a 3-dimensional presence and flowing quality with multiple circles, lines, and organic shapes echoing throughout each image. To bring the overall compositions together, prints are often completed with hand-applied paints, fabric dyes, and multiple layering. Judy Pfaff's sculptures, drawing, and prints have been exhibited in museums and galleries around the world. She has been described as a collagist in space. Pfaff has received many awards, including fellowships from the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. In 2004, Pfaff was named a MacArthur Fellow. She lives and works in New York State. Please join me in welcoming one of my all-time favorites, Judy Pfaff.
That was nice. Thank you very much. It's such a pretty day in Boston, and I want to thank you for that, because I had fear of coming here, you know, that blizzard thing. Is this way loud? I graduated in painting from Yale, and it is not a place I would suggest anybody go. But the good news was that Al Held was my teacher, and he was a tough guy. And I was, in my own way, tough. I'm combative, but I worry. So I sort of have a loud bark, but I go home and cry. So it worked out fine. What was interesting about that education is I knew I never wanted to paint again. And I was in the painting department. Al's wife at the time was Sylvia Stone, who was a sculptor. He was this close to Eva Hesse. He had been married to Yvonne Rainer. So he had good taste in women, I thought. And he also was self-made and kind of he sold pickles in Orchard Street, you know, so he was a kind of Russian Jew who was so smart, and he looked like Marlon Brando, so I paid attention to him. Anyway, I'm gonna tell you true that these slides start maybe a year after I got out of graduate school, so nothing I did in undergraduate or graduate school made sense to me, because I think I was fighting the language, the academy, the painting shtick. But I think the rules of painting sort of stuck with me, and I thought I could bring them over to sculpture, which seemed like a good idea at the time, because the people who were making sculpture, who were the heavy hitters, who were still the heavy hitters, were the Richard Serras, the Donald Judds, the minimalists for sure. So it sort of seemed like there was this mafia out there, mostly guys. But there were also these chinks coming in. There were chinks in the armor. There was Linda Benglis, Alan Surratt. There were softer kind of idiosyncratic sculpture than dealing with materials. So those were the things that I was interested in, but I was never idea-based. So I really had to just search through materials. And did I say all that stuff about the year of the router? I think I did. I think I'd said that. It was true. So, and also I had a dealer who said, be careful where you take her, because I'll end up having to look at that imagery for the next year. That's my studio in 1973. At this point, I had 13 puppies. So I would come home after work, and they would rearrange things. And I thought that they did a much better job than I did. But it was also that because I was a painter and I was trying to work my way through sculpture, these were very, Canal Street materials, and I thought at the time I was sort of working out structures and spaces, and if it's flat or dimensional or how you saw things. This studio was Richard Serra's. Well, he had left. And the aluminum foil came about because I wanted to exercise him. And I thought, what material would he hate? Thank you very much. And it was a good material for me because it was cheap. And I could make aluminum pots and pans. I could make figure sculptures. I could make organic things. And so it gave me a cheap and easy vocabulary. And it also, when the sun came down, everything actually turned to gold. So I liked that. It was like a moment. So a lot of these things they're really casual, and it was really trying to work things out, trying to find my way. And I was a real adult at this time. So this, it's not like I was like this whiz kid. I have to work my way through it. These are the same studio, little other activities. No one saw this. The only thing I liked about this is when the wind blew, all the balls rolled around and sort of reconfigured. So there was a little bit of waiting for something to happen, being directed and involved, but then hoping that it was better than I had designed. Like an element, an illusion would come, the sun would make it into something else. This was a show that I did when I taught at CalArts, which I was there for 3 years. And believe it or not, these are all portraits of people I knew. And there's Mike Kelly was one of my students, a woman named Jill Griegerich, Richard Archschwager was, I was teaching with him, so he's represented in this. So because it was CalArts, there were these shops, and the only thing that they were doing in the shops was repairing motorcycles. So my boyfriend at the time ran the shop, so I learned how to TIG, weld, and MIG, and do joinery. So this kind of was my making real things, real sculpture for the first time, and using a different kind of space that wasn't so rambling. And I do think that it was crowded, so I thought it was sort of this, not just noisy, but you could identify personality and attitudes, and within that I could also learn how to make things. The guy walking into the wall was for Richard Archschwager. I don't know if you know him, he's really cool, and he's really opaque, and he's really gothic, and he's really droll and intellectual, and he thought it was a portrait of me dealing with him. Yeah, these slides are really blown out. I'm sorry about that. That's me. These are the drawings for that work. This is me trying to grow up a little bit, so I thought these were, in a funny way, like computer generated without a computer, so they're just on graph paper, and so all the moves for these images I was making, I worked out in this way. So you can see there's sort of like an annunciation here and a child in a mother and child sort of thing. So there, inside these little drawings were sort of little stories. And that story thing, I think, is something that keeps me off the streets at night. This was, in 1979, what was fantastic about this space is it was not only big, but the director of the museum wasn't there, so they didn't tell me what to do. And it was a show that Irving Sandler put together as a Neuberger. And this room had been the room that showed Cleve Gray. And I don't know if you know those paintings. They're a little bit like, they're very dark, they're very sober, they're very Rothko dying thing. So I knew I wanted to sort of not only brighten this thing, the show was called Reinventing the Wheel, but there was a kind of a fission that went on. You're gonna have to just, that's what I thought it looked like, and I think that's the way it operated, is you came in and it's sort of, there were so many points that you sort of didn't know where to look, and it had a kind of narrative through history, through Russian constructivism, and there's like this plastic sort of thing that if you walked around fast, it sort of had a television video thing. There was stuff on the floor that was refraction grating. So I thought I was sort of going through, there was an African section, so a little bit there was a kind of narrative of history, retelling a story, and also some of the people who were in my last piece were in this one. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I got a grant that year, and I was thrilled to be able to buy so much stuff. And, oh, I forgot to tell you, in that show was Laurie Anderson, Ree Morton, I don't know if you know who she is, Jonathan Borofsky, people who I still treasure, and we were chums, you know, there working together. And Irving Sandler had put a show together from Artist Space of artists who kind of got introduced at Artist Space, which was the first nonprofit alternative space in New York or anywhere. And so this was like 6 years later. What are they doing? Where are they? So it was a really nice, oh, that last one, let me go back. That was at the Hayden Gallery, which is somewhere around here, right? It's MIT, is that right? It was a show which was put together by Helene Posner on the body. So these figures sort of came in there. And I think you can see that's beginning a little bit more environmental. This was the end of my figures. I had it. There was something about, I never had dolls, don't like dolls. But there was something about, if I knew who that image was and the head fell off or the hand, it just seemed weird, like voodoo, like bad voodoo. And I knew that I was not, this figurative thing had just run its course. I also, at that point, was making these people because I was very concerned. I think in your 30s, you're very concerned about relationships. So it was a way to sort of deal with my friendships or my relationships and sort of give them form. So this work is much more, it was called Charms, as in, I don't know, particles of subatomic physics. I was married when I was 16 and my husband was a physicist. And I think I was not the nicest to him. I kept leaving. And so I think I gave him this piece or thought about erratic particles and something atomic and something spatial. And it seemed that it was kind of an homage in that way. After that, well, during that, it was in Houston, Texas, that show, and I went to the Yucatan. I don't climb trees or swim or do anything like that, but I tried to snorkel. And I was in the town of Merida and went to all these other places, and I was convinced that the color of Mexico or anything south of the border was the exact palette that I needed. And I was hearing at that time that my color was really gaudy and, bad taste or decorative or whatever it was. And when I went to Mexico, the Yucatan, I thought, they are so full of it, like everything alive is actually full of color. The plants down there were full of color. And so I thought it was this, I was, what's it called, filled with like, they think they've seen color, they ain't seen nothing yet. So this was my power, this was like, and I just loved that trying to snorkel. There was this spacelessness, and gravity was gone away, and I was determined that sculpture didn't have to do that thing about mass and weight and be there. It could kind of be everywhere. So that gave me, I had been doing that before, but I sort of understood that that's what I was doing when I was trying to be in the ocean, yeah? All of this stuff is basket weaving material, raffia and rattan sticks. This was, oh, these slides are so terrible, oh my goodness. This was a show at Holly Solomon Gallery. It was called Deep Water. This was my real entree into the art world, meaning that people thought it was dreck or they thought it was interesting. Whatever it was, there was a conversation. And I had just been trying to figure out, it was my first show in New York City. It was the Holly Solomon Gallery. I don't know if you know who she is. She's kind of this amazing personality. She's sort of like the Marilyn Monroe of the art world at that time. Tiny, white hair, glamorous, loved to wear white minks and take you to Paris on a whim, which, I don't know, I thought that was so cool. Anyway, I had been making this stuff. The last shot was in the studio, and when I brought the material into the gallery, something happens in galleries. I think you know this. Things look better than they did in the studio because you can see them, but they also lose something. They lose the life, they lose the immediacy. Something gets lost in the shuffle. So I think this installation thing was really not an idea, but to try to kind of resuscitate the work and to bring it back to life. And the sensation that I was trying to get with this show is that when you walked through the gallery, it was about 80 feet long, that you had this feeling like you were going down, not across. So there are things like that, sensations. I was more involved in trying to get to a sensation than to be terribly graphic in other ways. The same year, this was in the Hirshhorn. It was called Kabuki, and I always tell this story because it's important. I lost half of the work getting to Washington. It blew off the back of the truck, which always happens to me. And I got to DC and went to see Kagemusha. And so this, that evening, and this piece, when I got to the space, looked like a little kabuki stage set. So it had a very Japanese feel to it. Thank you to that. And also, it's a federal building. Now, I don't know, there are lots of rules like don't put screws in the wall, don't paint the wall, don't do this, don't do that. They knew that I was invited, so I could do those things. But the federal the security, or whatever they were, guys in gray suits, decided that this floor was too shiny and that you would slip on it. And so they brought down these meters that tested the floor. They're called skidometers. I love that. Anyway, I did not pass the skidometer test. Now, it was painted with floor and deck enamel, which every American, porch in America is painted with. So I thought, this can't be true. So I quickly thought that they should actually test the polished marble floor of the Smithsonian right outside. It was off the charts bad. They either had to close down the Smithsonian or let me stay open. Also, since that didn't work, they brought in the wheelchair test. So they had to navigate. And I'm thinking, if I have to, you can't tell because everything squishes together. But if I can get through there and make it, then I knew. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is, like, you think you're in a museum and it's going to be fabulous. It's better now, I think, because they're sort of used to people doing these kinds of things. But anyway, this is the Whitney. Was a union shop. So it got so bad, I was sick for 3 days. And it got so bad because they wouldn't let me touch anything, like put the lights in or anything. But they were so freaked out about this material that they made a deal. It's like, we're going to leave at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're going to come back at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we won't know what you did, you know? So we won't tell. So there was that kind of deal-making that went on. But what I did like about all of this stuff is I think you think you're best when you're completely panicked. I don't know why. I do anyway. It's a sort of a... if I have time, I think everything is, I'll do it tomorrow. So when these things were being done, it was beat the clock, you know. And also, the stuff is actually quite scruffy, and I think men had a hard time with it because it pokes you a bit, and if you touch it, it wiggles. So it's not very, it doesn't, so no one ever, people say, you know, anybody get hurt? It's like, no, they're so frightened of it. They don't know how it's put together. So for me, these pieces were mostly about not just the image. This was called Dragon, so I really wanted it to go vertical. And because I was English and my grandmother told stories about, you know, there's all of St. George and the Dragon and sort of those English tales, I really wanted it to be vertical instead of horizontal. And so getting things to sort of spiral up and not to have the mechanics of that showing, that's been my, something I'm sort of interested in, is how to structure these things without being aware that there's, you know, how it's being held up. I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. This was in Massachusetts. I think what was funny about this is the space was like 10 feet wide, 8 feet high, 80 feet long, and I said, yeah, this is a piece of cake. Now, I also thought that the Amherst was in Vermont. Why I don't know these things, I don't know. So I thought I would meet all these woodsmen, and so I brought 3 chainsaws with me, thinking I'm going to hang out with guys. We're going to chop trees down, and it's going to be really fun. Now, I don't know if you know Amherst. They're all professors at Amherst. So anyway, I did buy a log, a store-bought log, and it was dimensional lumber, 20 by 20, and splintered it. It was just kind of mad. And it took me the longest time to get out of this space. It was a little bit like building a ship in a bottle. So, but I think with each one of these pieces at the time, I did learn something. Sometimes things you don't want to learn, but you learn them. And within that, each piece I actually added probably a technique or a material, or this was in the Venice Biennale in 81. I think it was 81. Well, what to say? You're in Italy. It was completely chaotic. The opening came and went, and they forgot to tell us. We were in the Giudecca, which is a fabulous sort of old Jewish part of Venice, across from Venice. And it was an old shipbuilding yard, and our stuff had never gotten off the boat, off the plane to the boat to the place. I think they found the David Sallies in the Polish pavilion. It was an international show that was just wonderful and very Italian. It's where you get those feelings like Fellini was not, you know, it was just documentary footage, you know. So anyway, what I liked about this piece is I got to roll around on scaffolding all day and have a kind of Italian experience painting ceilings. I thought it paid homage to the futurists. I wanted to do something about sound. And when I was there were 2 wars that started. It was the Falkland Islands and something else. And there were strikes all over Italy, not because of that, but because they love to strike in Italy. And so it became an image about kind of for me, the noise overhead, like the cracking of something exploding over your head. And so whatever I thought I was going to do at the time became this other thing. So it's in Germany. It's called a Ziggurat. By the way, this could pass the wheelchair test also, but it's, I don't even know what. Yeah, that looks dense, doesn't it? I have to tell you that this show was, it was called Westkunst, Western art. It was art from 1935 to 1981. The only women in the show were in this corridor of at that time, young artists. There were no women in the historical section. Also, they had Schwitters, Picasso, Beuys, Hockney, everyone, Oldenburg, Warhol. There was no one woman in the entire history from 35, this historical show. I found that to be fascinating and strangely, like, bells are slow to go off in my head. And then I sort of realized that actually I was the only woman in my class at Yale, that I'd never had a woman teacher. So there were things that I sort of realized that I'm sort of a little anarchistic, but I also don't really know who or what I'm pushing against or angry with. And with these kind of experiences, it dawns on me that there are people write the books, people say what's good and bad, you inherit all those kind of rules and stuff. And I think I was on a tear. Like, how dare they think color is bad? How dare they think that I'm this mad explosion in a glitter factory or whatever sort of things? I thought I was being a guerrilla fighter. Like, fuck them if they can't take a joke. I don't know, something. And this, you can't tell because, one, it's you can't see anything, but it was surreal. And I thought, that's because I'm in Germany and I get haunted by ideas about things. And before I went there, the only research I did was about the Black Forest and Grimm's fairy tales. So obviously that was sort of, I think, kind of seeping up through the image. So what I'm trying to say is that there are, like, you inherit the piece you did before, so you're adding to that. But you also are adding this new narrative, especially if you do installations the way I do them, with just like try not to think too much and try to be there, be as present as you can. So what's interesting for me now is looking back and sort of seeing sort of what it was. These were drawings that I did probably with that kind of underwater image stuff that I was. These are 14 feet, this was 14 feet long by about 5 feet high. Lots of adhesives, lots of layers. I don't think in a way much changes. The materials change. This was at the Albright Knox, a great museum, a great American collection. This was an homage to Clifford Still and all those guys, Pollock and, all of them. But also what you can't tell is there's a drop down this staircase that was, I threw buckets of paint down there for Niagara Falls. And it was called rock, paper, scissors. So I thought there were 3 languages going on, this sort of structural one, this sort of flirty one, this sort of being in place one, this sort of soft one, hard one. However, that group sort of adds up. For me, it took me a while to develop this because it was sort of, you can't tell, but it was physically hard to get to places. But this was my last show at Holly Solomon. And in a funny way, I was never going to make another installation. My friends were getting sick of me, not sleeping, running out of money, running around, forgetting where I put my keys, losing a dog here and there. It was just a kind of, I was sort of a somnambulist, and everything is thrown away, by the way. None of this stuff exists. So I had 35 years of throwing everything away. not good, not smart, not reading the fine print. This is I don't know how you see that. Boy, the slides are terrible. This is me in Japan. What was nice is they gave me an awful lot of money. Actually, they didn't give me any money. They just I didn't have to pay for anything. So I don't know how much anything cost. I was staying in a nice place. I was clean most of the time. And they gave me a space to work on the parts to the piece that was in an old auto body shop near Tsukiji, near the fish market. And what was interesting is the guy who ran the place where the show was a little bit like Donald Trump, or he was the Donald Trump of Japan, Tsukamoto-san. And he'd had this extra space he wasn't using, and the zoning was such that he couldn't really use it for what he wanted, how to develop it. So I was there for a couple months. When I left, I think the week before, or the day before, the week after, the zoning changed. He made billions of dollars because this place could be torn down and he could put a high-rise there. So he thought I was his lucky charm. So you know that movie called Lost in Translation? That hotel he was at, that's the Akasaka Prince. Imagine me coming in like just, like me, and hundreds of people bowing, and it's white Carrara marble, and I just thought, oh my God. Anyway, I was his lucky charm. This is the piece I did there. The space was a little bit like the Guggenheim, so it's a big atrium. It's an homage to Japan. There's lots of wood cutting in here. It's a big ikebana. It says things in there. There are signs that say river, moon, sun, I don't know. And everyone who helped me, so it's part of their name. So it not only identified what you were looking at, because I wanted to do that language image thing, but it was also, I don't know, I thought it was so graphic and sort of jaunty. And, there was a nods to the kind of rural architecture. And I horrified the Japanese. I horrified them. They couldn't, it was like, oh my God. I think because they didn't know what it was, even though I told them what it was, because it was that names on things, like kanji. The materials are so traditional that if you use bamboo in a way that's not bamboo-ish, there's almost no way to look at it. So that, and because of tatami, no one knew to walk on things because they didn't know they could, because they wouldn't, because, so much for, being in, trying to be Japanese. I still love, so much of what I do is me trying to be a little more zen-y than my nature, and learn things and slow down and appreciate things. So for me, this was a real entry into a kind of other world, which I like so much. This space is now a coffee shop. I came back home. Holly Solomon had moved uptown, and she said, okay, no more installations. And and the place, you can tell, low ceilings, very domestic, weird. So I didn't know this at the time, but when I was coming back from returning from Tokyo, I'm in my truck going down a block, and on 13th Street there was a wok company that was going out of business. So I bought all the woks. This place made all the woks for Chinatown. So I thought it was fortuitous. And as I was leaving, I've told the story a lot, but it was really, when I was leaving, the guy said, oh, do you know the artist next door? He's well known. I said, no. And he said, well, his name is Frank Stella. And I said, oh, God, has he bought any woks lately? He bought no woks. So I was like, okay. And I said, so I'm like going back, like buying all the woks so he doesn't get the woks, because I was in enough trouble. Anyway, so what I liked about this is they were still lifes. And it was called Apples and Oranges. So it had that kind of aspect to it. I think also what I have noticed with a lot of art is you have a feeling you don't really know what you think about it because you think you have to know more than what it looks like. I really want things to sort of be what they look like. So if this looks jaunty and generous and, you know, full of motifs of fruit and eating, that is what it is. It is what it is. I also moved to Brooklyn, and there was something about the street life in Brooklyn and the kind of graphics. They don't have neon, and they don't have stained glass windows. They have contact paper, and at least the Brooklyn when I was there. Actually, I'm still there. But anyway, this was, I think, my Stuart Davis period. I tried to be real American and sort of Brooklyn-esque. I don't know if anyone thought this. I did. This was at John Weber Gallery. Across was Saul LeWitt, who was a good friend. And he did this circle drawing there. And it really just did look like we'd both been given the same project or same homework or something. And we both, so there was a nice relationship, which, I love that. I love that. This is actually much more volumetric than it looks. These spheres are 5 feet in diameter, so they're quite big. This was in the Whitney Biennial, 87. I don't know if you can tell. That's a Jeff Koons bunny right there. And this was, the 80s were deep now. And the cynicism and the kind of conceptual stuff and the Richard Princes and the, I don't know, the Jeff Koonses, the Barbara Krugers, everything kind of got cool and not just conceptual, just a little cynical, looking at media, thinking about things a very different way. And from this moment on, I realize how old school I am and will always be, and that the visual thing sort of takes precedent. I don't think there are no ideas, but they are not preconceived ideas. If I learn something, it's through kind of, you know, beating your head on the wall. These really were about the music coming back out of the backyards in Brooklyn. This is a moment, I love this. This is not this, but I went to Pilchuck, which is a glass-blowing place. It's fantastic. And they have the most handsome guys there. All glass-blowing guys are handsome. It's true, I hate to tell you, it's really true. And Billy Morris was a really good friend who is the most handsome of all glass blowers. I couldn't look at him for 2 years. Anyway, I was thrilled. Dale Chihuly made this place or put it together. And it's kind of on a mountaintop, and there's lumber all around. What are they called? Forests. They're called forests all around. And and in the place that I stayed at, there was this kind of, you look down and it's all wet, you know, it's like really wet in Seattle. And this is San Juan Islands, and the wind is blowing, and you've got glass blowing, and you've got hot and cold and wet and men and everyone's sleeping with each other. Not me, I'm like way old. But it was kind of, and I just thought, I like this breath thing. I like this like looking at spaces that come from nothing and then and it's just air that blew them up. And it's so ancient a thing. I don't know, I was delirious about glass. Now, I never could make anything there. It was just ludicrous because everything I wanted to do would break, and it was, you know, it's nuts. But what I did manage to do is I made some forms and I would give them to Billy and he would blow things into them, and that worked. The coefficient of expansion worked, so that I could do. So I was always going home at night trying to figure out how to get the glass to be more like I could be part of it, since I can't do it. You can't do it. It's 10 years to do it, to make a, glass. I mean, like something that had the form that you knew it was going to look that way when you started. So anyway, to try to insert myself, so the color went out for a while, and I just was involved with sort of blowing bubbles. Then the color came back. And this piece was called Warm and Tender Love, which is Percy Sledge. I don't know, he's like the best. And but there was something about that era. You know, I was living in Detroit, and there were these places where music kept coming out of these downstairs sort of churches and stuff. So I wanted to do something that sort of seemed musical, sort of seemed churchy. So there's a lot of stained glass look-alike things. It's actually painted plastic, but. And this was one period, I think 4 or 5 years, where I did not do installations at all. I vowed never to do it again. This was called Barcelona for Gaudi. It says planetary time, straw into gold. The nice part about this, I thought, was all of these bed springs, which were charred and burned, were from the neighborhood in Brooklyn, and I was determined to sort of change this sort of very sad stuff that I kept finding and make it kind of beautiful, even though it still looked like bed springs. Milagro, my neighbor. This is a print. I put a print in there for you, Lynn. It doesn't matter. An aside. More stuff. This is my studio in Brooklyn. I have a beautiful studio still. This was a piece I did with Ursula von Riddingsvart. I don't know if you know her. She's pretty great. She has a show up right now at Sculpture Center. She made the bottom, I made the top. The irony was, she lived on the second floor and I lived on the first floor, and I had never had a big brown square object in my life ever. Like, ever. So she brought the piece down, and actually she went to Anguilla. So I'm calling Anguilla saying, okay, Ursula, I'm standing on it now. I'm drilling holes in it now. I have to burn it now. And now I'm actually going to lift it off the floor. You know, so it's up like 6, 8 inches or something. And Ursula's so nice, she said, okay. You know, and it was interesting because both of us, we were invited by, I don't know if you know this place, Exit Art. The people who run Exit Art are Papo Colo and Jeanette Ingberman, who are like amazing. They wanted us to do a show together because we're such opposites. She is very, well, she works in one material, which is wood. It's cedar. It's usually dimensional lumber. It's one kind of cut, millions of shapes. It comes basically out of her sort of life as in Poland or as a refugee in Germany. And I was, you know, light and all over the place. And I think they really wanted to see what that looked like together. So this funny, you know, like 2 people in bed, you know, together. So I like this piece. I think Ursula was mortified. And we're still really good friends. So anyway, I got used to that brown material. So this is all cedar from Pilchuck area. Again, I don't know if you can tell, but these are not installations. These are things now. Not that I saved them either, but. There's prints. 4 prints. This is on the roof of, oh, I don't know where it is, Denver, Colorado. This was my, oh man. I was working on the roof in this wonderful show that was put together with it was about landscape. The show was about landscape. A lot of people in it, a lot of really good people in it. In March in Denver, sometimes I would come up, things would be knee-deep in ice and snow. And then it would be 90 degrees. It was like my Donner's Pass. You know, I mean, I just looked like I'd been run over by more than one truck. Anyway, that made a good picture, but it was a tough thing to do. And I wanted to have things roll about. There was actually lead balls on stuff because the wind would just, there were little tornadoes up there, personal tornadoes. This is in Exit Art again. It was called, I don't know, what was it called? The show was called Garden of Sculptural Delights from Bosch. And the work started getting this gooey thing going on, and this fiberglass resins, and much more spidery. I'm now looking at this knot here, because this freaks me out. I can't even, just awful. So this looks much better up here. So this is some of the glass that was done at Pilchuck with this fiberglass resin stuff. Studio in Brooklyn. Drawings. Studio. This was in Kingston. I had just moved up to teach it. I teach at Bard College. Brandeis. It was called Elephant. It went all the way down through the center, and there was a reflecting pool that they hadn't used for 20 years, so I took out the stuff and we filled it up with water, and we put all these plants in there, which the botany department gave me, so it was really kind of interesting. This was a major fiberglass, like, kill thing. I don't know if you've ever used, I had 55 gallons of fiberglass that I triggered off in probably 30 minutes, so there's all this stuff that had to be spread, and it's very gooey, so it's kind of a viscousy. It was called elephant, as in like you're inside an elephant, like and you try to talk about it and you describe it, and it's like the blind men describing an elephant. This was in Ohio. I taught in Ohio in '74, and all I can remember about Ohio is I was frozen most of the time. So I sort of put it back, I took out most of the HVAC. I think I lowered the temperature of the entire museum 10 degrees in the winter, not meaning to, but it made sense to me to do that anyway. So it was a Beaux-Arts museum, so I took out skylights, and all of the stuff was up there, so it just really, I put blue light up there, and it just moved the air around, so the all the spaces had sort of little turbulences in it, and so I thought it was incredibly successful. A lot of fiberglass. I'm living on the river at this moment. Actually, it was a space that John Walker and a man named Alan Cody owned, and it was a big tugboat factory. I think John actually has incredible sense of real estate and place. So if you looked out the window in my place, the river was right there. It's called the Roundout Creek. It goes right onto the Hudson. I was so astonished that I wasn't in New York City, and I think this was a total reaction to sort of nothing happening. So I think this is as quiet a piece as I've ever done in terms of the visuals. It was quite mechanically complicated, but these are trees that I drug in from the river. The funny thing about this show is it was a place called Andre Emmerich, and Andre is a very classy guy, and he showed mostly an era of 70s painters, lyrical painters, color field painters, so he really didn't have sculptors, and I think he left that gallery 3 months after my show, sold it to Sotheby's, and then Sotheby's let it go. Anyway, this was when I represented the American in Sao Paulo Biennale, and it was, in fact, I heard this was a synagogue. Was this a synagogue? A lot of the things on the floor of this were actually based on the Catholic churches, so there was sort of nods to the churches that were there, and the kind of Catholicism that was there. I made this ramp. It was 120 feet long, 12 feet high, no, 24 feet high. The midpoint was where this walking is. This is a piece that's my favorite. I don't know why. It was up for 3 days. I had to take it down. It's this plaster casting of, it's called a sweet mold. Italians do it for when they're doing pieces on the ceiling. Anyway, there was this woman named Madame Blavatsky, who a long time ago I was sort of thinking about, and Goethe and this color thing, and I also had worked for Albers when I was at Yale, and so this color, ideas about color and sensations of color interested me. And this space was shaped like a fish, which seemed interesting. So I just made these things. Like I said, it was up for it. Took me, I was not going to do this. I swore I was not going to do this, but it was like my favorite piece. But anyway, so it had this kind of lunar, strange, floaty thing about it that I loved. And it was also so smooth and, for me, kind of elegant. And it was in, forms that sort of I had not really used before. Anyway, this was in 2001. It was in Savannah, Georgia. I had a place 4 blocks away from the World Trade Center, and this show was supposed to open in October. And I couldn't, and I think because Savannah is such an old town and it's so much about restoration, I thought, they won't know that I'm upset about this thing, but I'll do this thing, which was called the Squares of Savannah, which is the way the town is organized. I'll pull images off of the railings and off of the moldings and and it'll just be this kind of my restoring mode, The dome is actually made with lath and, scratch coat and brown coat and finish coat. And so it was really made like traditional. And so it had, at this point, architecture is kind of taking over and casting and taking things from the space, from the town, from the place where I am. So it had a kind of a giving back. This is something I did at the Elvium, which is now called the Chazen. It's in Madison, Wisconsin, where all the riots are, that beautiful state house that you see all those people inside. And it's like such a flat city, and it's so kind of, it's a college town. It's so cool. I love that they're doing that. I hope they win. I'm supposed to be not political. So anyway, this place is 70s architecture. It has so many staircases and so many cast things in it that I thought I should add some more staircases just to fill it out. It was also, this show opened in the middle of winter, so I thought everybody in Madison needed a kind of sitting place with green things, so there's a kind of garden in there. Also, the floor was kind of a copy of a pilgrimage in some church in Spain. This is in Japan. It's a drawing show. This is a tandem press. Now, I have to tell you about printmaking because it pays my rent. And I have this great place in Wisconsin, Tandem Press. They let me do stuff, and I'm very fast and very slow, and meaning I don't really know how many prints I'm going to make. I don't know what they're going to be. They now know just to leave me alone, and I will figure it out slowly. I make all the frames, and they've got a press that can print things which are 10 feet long. So, of course, things are 10 feet long. And I don't know, it's been I'm so used to throwing things away and having to install them. These are taken away from me and sold. And they have a life outside of my studio once they're made, once they're proofed and editioned. So it's kind of this amazing gift that finding printmaking was for me. I also did study with Peter Marcus in Washington University, who's a great guy. And I did study with Gabor Petterdy, who I love. And he actually didn't want to be talked about as a printer. He wanted to be a painter. And all he would tell you about is in France, how he worked with Leger and Picasso and whoever. So anyway, that was the first body of prints I made. These are drawings, actually. I moved upstate to be at Bard, got a Victorian house, and Everything was about architecture at this point. This is images from like the Pagan Plain and the Moon Gate from Japan or China, and there are post and beam, there was Islamic nods to Islamic stuff. So it was sort of this show went through 4 spaces, so it had all of these, there are mandalas, there are, you know, it was a kind of a hodgepodge of all this stuff. It was a nice walk. It was like a walk in the park, in some funny park. And it was a kind of a sweet show for me to do because I felt like I was really learning things. And it had a kind of elegance to it which surprised me. This is the roof of my Mansford, in Mansford roof, part of the roof in my Victorian house. I was making a stage set, so they needed me to make a model. That's the stage set. It was for an opera at Bard College, the Frank Gehry Theater. That's when it's lit. That's my dog, Willie. This show is sort of sad. It doesn't look it. It does when I go through it, I think. But Al died, my friend. My mom died. You know, Elizabeth Murray died. Everybody was just dying. There are these moments. And I had to do another show in that same place when I just bought that Victorian house, so it was about this thing. This, I wanted it to be so black and white, so kind of directed, which is not my way of doing things. But I knew everything that I was going to do in that show. I mean, I had to install it, so it sort of obviously looked a little different. But it was in my head. I knew it was like a clear vision. I think it was interesting and it was extremely moody and then not so moody. But I think ultimately it had this blaze. The windows just blazed across everything. And the glaze it gave was perfect. It was perfect for me, what I needed, what this was. So I think it's interesting that you can really go about things differently, change your mind, be spontaneous, not be spontaneous, use found things, use, you know, like you will handle them. Materials just get handled the way you handle them, so it doesn't really matter. Like, I don't feel like there's one material that's sort of mine, or that kind of signature thing that I think a lot of artists of a certain time had. And this is my studio upstate. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm actually carving styrofoam. So those things that look really like major casting, forget about it. They're like styrofoam. So it's, I could make billions of these things. So there's a kind of low-tech thing going on. This was, I don't know if you've ever go down there. Houston is one of the great towns to look at, you know, the De Menil collection, to be in the George W. Bush Airport and go by Halliburton. So you can get kind of crazy in Houston. So I think it had a kind of space thing going on. It looks like Tron to me, but anyway. I thought it was kind of, when I was 16, I lived in Sweetwater, Texas, so I actually thought about, it began as sort of dust storm stuff, but it didn't. It became, I don't know, this thing. Anyway, it was called All of the Above. Jamie is my assistant. He likes to work when I do things in tall places because he's a rock climber. So I just wanted to show you some of the kind of rigging that goes on. This is underneath. This is looking out from that installation into a space where the drawings and prints are. This is this body of prints, and this is me working in Brooklyn, and it was called Year of the Dog. That was the year I was born, Al was born, not the same year, but in that zodiac thing, and they died that year. So this was for me. It doesn't have any of this residual pathos. As a matter of fact, I think of this whole body of work as being kind of, if not happy, kind of like how you get yourself out of sadness. So right after this whole thing happened, I was supposed to go to Hawaii to work at a place called Hui Press. And it took a year to get back there. And it was so beautiful that I couldn't hold on to that there. So all of this came from, I started cutting the plates there. I don't know if you can see this. This is what they look like when I installed them. So all of them are together. This is my studio upstate. We're getting really close. I'm sorry, I'm like, lar, 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 lar. I love this space. This is my Quonset hut. That's Willie again. What was great about doing that body of work is I made them give me all the leftovers. You know, like I'll cut the original, and we got all these plates, and everything's being cut up. And I just said, send me all this stuff back. So all these drawings for a year or two have been really generated from the prints, which come from the drawings, which lead to the sculpture. So it's all of a kind of meld. Huh? These are 8 feet by 8 feet tall, so they're quite big. They're 6 to 8 inches thick. This is called Konya. I went to Istanbul. Most of this work now is made out of paper, and I'm by myself in the studio. There's people around helping me cut the grass or put up buildings, and if I need something moved. But basically for the last, I think, 4 or so years, it's just me now. So there isn't a lot of sort of a crew of 90 or any of that, which sometimes with installations, at the last minute, there needs to be a lot of bodies. And also, these flowers just lately have been turning into kind of rotting things, because now I'm planting things. You get the season of flowers, and you get the season of non-flowers, and the frozen things, and the dead things. That's when this piece was in University of Maryland. And it's the first time I've ever done this. This is the same piece that I sent to North Carolina, so I'm trying not to throw things away. Obviously, it looks a little different. I'm very much in love with honeycomb cardboard, honeycomb stuff, mostly because it comes from a place called Bogalusa, and there's this guy who invented the machine to make this stuff, and he is deep, you know, like Louisiana guy, and he couldn't believe I found his name. Anyway, he sent me all this stuff for free because he likes artists and he likes teachers. So, and I sent him some catalogs and stuff. I don't think I've ever heard from him again, but he's so nice, anyway. But I like that, like this material that I love just got sent to me like a gift, yeah. And there's lots of these lanterns. I'm sort of enamored with lanterns. This is a new piece, again with this kind of fungus and tree rot and stuff. This is my last show, parts of the last show. It's my studio. This is my garden. My greenhouse garden. Fluorescent lights. That's us making the studio, one of them. And that's my earth-moving equipment and my Airstream. Very proud. And MacArthur bought these things. So, ta-da. Thank you. Do you have any questions? I know that I ramble. I'm sorry. I go in and out of consciousness when I'm up here.
Hello.
When you take your shows down, where does all the material go?
I actually try to save stuff because I'm involved with it. It's all kind of handmade. And then 5 years later, the dog has eaten it, or the roof fell on it, or it becomes mulch. The only things that exist were those metal pieces, those kind of wall works. They exist. And some of this new stuff I'm trying to take care of, but basically it's thrown away. It is thrown away. And it's not a lament, it's just, I just think it's stupid to do that. You know? And also, even when I took the one piece that was in one space to another space, it took me the same amount of time to fit it that it did to make it. And that seems stupid, you know? So I'm not sure how to deal with most of the logistics of things. That's why become a printmaker. And work with a great press. So. Usually I don't wait. I just run away. So.
Hi. So I just wanted to kind of clarify about your technique. Do you usually you have a space where the gallery is, or where you're going to be exhibiting your work?
The staging of things, yeah.
And so the actual work is assembled or painted according to the room?
I would say it depends on how nervous I am. Like if I'm installing in the Museum of Modern Art or something, I'll be pretty together. If I think the space, if the people who run the space are open-ended, then I will build the whole thing there. Most of the time, I would say at least 60% is made before, and then I have to find where it goes. It's like, I think of it like moving into a new apartment, and it really takes you a while to know where to put that thing. You know, I mean, in your old place, things get their nature. You know where things go. A new place, the logic is not quite as evident, you know. But that's actually when things happen, so that I like. By the way, most people don't do installations like that. They sort of have things that can expand and contract, and they sort of, you know, the field might be a wallpaper field or something like that people can help do. A lot of this stuff is, it's in my head. I don't make drawings for things, so that's a little problematic. That's why it's really funny when they asked me to make the model for the stage set. It's like, I'll make a model, but it ain't gonna look like what you get. So, and they didn't know that. They thought it was gonna be what they got. So, I mean, I thought that was a funny thing to think that this little thing was gonna be this big thing, you know? Yeah, so anyway. All right, I'm out of here. Thank you very much. And by the way, all the students, we got a question, you got a question? No, we're scared.
Sorry, one more I'm really curious about is for some of them, it seems like you might need a big team of people.
Some of them, yes.
And I was curious how many people have stayed with you for the long haul, and how different people affect your work.
Oh, that's such a good question. My most beautiful crew just left. Rob has been with me for 20 years. He quits every other month. I had a great crew. They were a Japanese couple, and they were, I think being Japanese, they were so nice, and she was the best cook ever. They both were metalsmiths, so they had to they fitted things, you know? Like, I would like weld something and I'd get it back and it would be like a beautiful thing. So their touch was so nice that I got spoiled. Also, we planted things, we had Japanese vegetables, you know, it was so great, and they left because they have a business that they decided they would do. I would say I have a transient, I like that there are students that come in. It's very hard given what I do, because most people, when they come to the studio, think they're going to be making art, and all we're doing is washing dishes. Or, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's stupid stuff. But if they're not doing that, I'm doing that, you know? So, and I like to clean, by the way. I'm the best sweeper you will ever know. I am like amazing. And so there's I think you can tell I have a lot of kind of real estate. There's a lot of volume. There's a lot of parts to things. Nothing is particularly crated or taken care of. I'm trying to do that now. But people, Jamie, how long? Jamie was he works for 4 months, then he goes and climbs mountains and comes back after the snow leaves, you know. He's on the West Coast now. So he comes back, and he comes back a lot. So they're kind of, but he doesn't, none of these people actually are in the studio anymore, only for a big show. And that just means I can't physically lift it, be there. And like the sweep molds, I can say, we need to cut this shape. I need some brackets, let's make 20 of those. 20 is if they ask me how many I need, I say 20. I learned that in Japan. Because they always wanted a specific number, and I couldn't think of what that would be, so 20 became the number, and it always seemed to work out. Yeah, so. But I don't think people stay long, which is, it's also because they don't have health care. I've never figured out how to afford a kind of adult, you know? It's very, very expensive to sort of really run. And also, it makes it a business. I don't do business, you know? I want to keep it like, I hate that idea about having secretaries and accountants and shrinks. And so it stays pretty homemade. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not a business. It does not feel like a business when you come to my studio, you know? Did you see the Art 21 on Jeff Koons' thing? It's like unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's like 500 assistants, you know, like, I don't, you know, billions of, you know, like, you know, it's kind of amazing. It's amazing. It freaked me out, like completely freaked me out. But this is a man who understands aspects of business, you know. So. Do we get to eat Thai food now? Oh. Hi.
I was wondering if BU has given you a show yet, or when it will be.
Oh. I never knew where BU was. No, it's true. It's true. I knew that this is very funny. Whenever I do a show, I travel, but I don't go anywhere. Like if in Sao Paulo, someone said, did you do the market? Did you dance? Did you go to a club? Did you go to Rio? It's like, no. I know Harvard. I know that little place. No, MIT. It's MIT. So no, but it's a beautiful city. I always, you know, I think New York is so much cooler, but when I was driving in, I thought, yeah, it has some grace. The architecture is so beautiful. The students here, I had a great time today. So you have great teachers. And no, I haven't. No. Thank you very much.